It was almost my 17th birthday, and I just finished playing all of Zelda Breath of the Wild. I got all the side quests, shrines, and maxed out the green fit for Link, so I was a little obsessed with Nintendo games at the time. But did I go out and buy a couple of Nintendo games to feed my obsession? No, because they're all $80. So I just watched a bunch of reviews for these games until I ran out of reviews to watch, and then I realized that I should probably get one of these games since I kinda had a problem. So I decided to pick up Age of Calamity. I mean, it was an easy choice for me. The Zelda cruise was through the roof with Breath of the Wild 2 trailers and stuff. I was hyped up about Zelda just like everybody else. All I talked about was Zelda, and that's pretty much what I did until my friends got tired of me talking about it so much. But when I was researching the game, I was kinda lost. Like, I thought this was a complete prequel to Breath of the Wild, and I thought this meant that it had a canon story and it was going to be the same gameplay style as Breath of the Wild, but turns out this game was non-canon, and it was a Warriors game. Just a quick disclaimer, I'll only be showing the first 2 chapters of gameplay for this review, plus some of the levels in the expansion pass. I'll also be discussing some Breath of the Wild story spoilers, but it's things that you probably already know, and the game has been out for 5 years, so I think we're good. And sorry if I'm a little mean in the video, and thank you for watching. So what is a Dynasty Warriors game? In short, it's basically a hack and slash fighting game where you kill enemies in the hundreds with various combos until eventually you'll fight a boss, which takes a little longer. They started with their own line of games and then they were like, hey, why don't we make a bunch of games for other people? And they did. This is just a list of how many games that they made. But despite how many games they have made, the Warriors type gameplay is definitely not for everybody. But personally, I really loved it. It's really fast paced and it's really satisfying cutting through the enemy like butter, and you feel like a god doing it. The only times that you have to kind of focus is when you're fighting the bosses, because you have to break their pizza shield looking things first, and then you can do some big damage. Other than mashing combos, every character has a Sheikah Slate which they can use in their own unique way. Link chucks them like dodgeballs, Lebedi just sends them out in front of him, and Daruk gets one huge bomb to blast everything. You can use these abilities whenever, but if you use the correct ability when the boss has it plastered on top of its face, you can break the pizza shield and it's really satisfying. Every character can also use an elemental rod that has the same 3 elements as Breath of the Wild. You got fire, ice, and electro. They're used in the same way, except there are no pop-ups for them. If you use them against certain enemies or in certain conditions, they'll do better. Like, if it's raining, the electric rod will do more damage. If it's a fire enemy, you can give it a nice popsicle and it'll get stunned for longer. This game on normal difficulty is pretty easy, but I'm not saying that that's a bad thing because I wanted to have a game where it felt godly, and that's exactly what I got. The strategy based side of the game is very easy and simple, and there were only a couple of times where I had to pay attention to the mission. The main side and story levels are like this, but there are some side levels which are ungodly hard for some reason, but there's like only a handful of those and they're optional. However, if you do want more of a challenge, there are 3 higher difficulties: hard, very hard, and apocalyptic, the last one being DLC though. Basically, this makes enemies hit harder, makes healing items more scarce, and makes bosses' shield much more stronger. If you do get tired of the constant hack and slash, you can play the Divine Beast missions that switch it up. These function like an arcade shooter, and I heard lots of people complaining about how these sections have clunking controls, which can get you stuck, and the huge frame rate drops, but for me, I didn't have a problem with these sections. In fact, they were probably one of my favorite parts in the game. The massive destruction that you can unleash is freaking awesome, and I love how all the Divine Beasts function a little differently, but they have similar mechanics. They got the laser beam blast, their pew pew lasers, a unique attack, and one attack that can trample everything, except for the bird. This isn't the most innovative gameplay of all time, but I'm overall very glad that they added the ability to use these Divine Beasts, because I had a blast. I'm really glad that they made this section playable instead of some cutscenes, because then you can cause all the destruction instead of just watching it. They're not just sitting there the whole game, shooting a ginormous laser. After you're done whatever mission you were doing, you go here, which is an exact replica of the Breath of the Wild map, and it has all the stuff you need, like shops, missions, collectibles, and upgrading stations. You can level up your character with rupees or combine weapons to make them stronger with a blacksmith. There's all sorts of stats and stuff to play around with if you are that type of person. But what really makes my monkey brain happy is this orange stuff. The orange things are places where you can use the rewards you get from missions to get more rewards, like extra combos or learning new recipes, and it's really satisfying getting all of them, because it makes you feel like gathering these items actually means something. It's not like Breath of the Wild, where most of the stuff is just sold to get more rupees. I know there were side missions and the jewelry shop in Gerudo Town where you can use your stuff, but this is 100 times better. This actually feels like you're moving towards your goal to build up a Hyrule to stop the calamity. Every time you give something, there's this little paragraph that tells you a little story, and I love it. It's just nice to see that I'm making an impact in a fictional world. Okay, I just wanted to give a quick warning that I'm gonna get a little negative here, so just bear with me here. One thing I have to say though is that this game is super repetitive, and many missions feel literally the exact same, and the enemy variety doesn't help that at all. The enemies you fight in the game is the exact same from Breath of the Wild, except for a couple of spins like Moblin is on fire and that's it. Oh, are you tired of fighting Linos thousands of times? Let's make it so it has electric powers instead. I mean, the enemy variety didn't really bother me because my screen looked like this most of the time, but even this can get a little repetitive. So, the game tries its best to add as much variety in characters so that you don't get bored, and honestly, it works. There are 18 different characters in the game, each feeling different and having different mechanics as well, like Uraboso having a lightning gauge, or Daruk being able to spawn stones with his combos, or Lebody just flying around. Also, Link and Zelda have different weapon types to keep things interesting. Like, I absolutely hated playing as Zelda, but when I unlocked her DLC weapon, which I'll talk about later, I fell in love with the character. And yeah, not all characters are good, but generally, it does just come down to opinion. Also, I just wanted to add that you can unlock all of Link's outfits from Breath of the Wild, including his Lino mask, which makes growling noises when you fight with it. Unfortunately, other characters don't really have this large wardrobe like him. Like, Zelda has 2 extra outfits, and then the champions can either wear or not wear their champion garments. So, not a lot of customizations for the skins, which isn't really a big deal, but it still would have been pretty cool to have more of them. The environments for the levels can be pretty weird. Sometimes they can be like, wow, this is what it looked like before it was screwed up by the calamity. And then sometimes you're like, is this really accurate to Breath of the Wild? Most of the time, it does. But one thing is for certain, is that they reuse a lot of levels. And this doesn't help the repetitiveness of the game whatsoever. A lot of times, not only are you fighting the same enemies, but you're fighting them in the exact same environment over and over. But are the levels designed well? Well, yeah, but I'm not sure how you could really screw up the levels. Like, you just make objectives in an order so that you don't be running around the whole map. Most levels are really basic, but the story levels are top-notch. The story levels are fun, have great boss fights, and have beautiful cutscenes. Usually, there's lots of objectives to do that keeps you focused, and it's really fun. There's also korok seeds and chests hidden in these levels for replayability. The chests give you random stuff like swords, and korok seeds gives you inventory space just like Breath of the Wild. Also, if you buy the DLC, it makes it so that on the menu map, you can see how much korok seeds and chests you collected, but if you ask me, I think it should have just been added with the game. The side missions are, as I said, not the greatest. I mean, they're still fun to do, they're just meh after a while. There were only a handful of side missions that were unique, like this one where you have to survive until the timer runs out. That's an awesome idea, but most of them are just go kill it till it dies type missions. However, there was a couple of missions that I absolutely hated, which were the NPC escort missions. Cause they're stupid. Because the NPCs you're escorting are complete idiots. Sometimes I would wonder where it went and look behind me and they're slowly trotting their way to me. But what's really bad about them is their fighting ability. They're just completely hopeless. Like if they had a 1v1 against a slime, they would lose. I can't tell you how many times I would have to kill one single enemy because the NPC was stuck fighting them. And I don't usually care when the gameplay is not narratively correct, but when the person you're escorting is a Hylian captain, or even worse, a playable character, it just infuriates me seeing how stupid they are. Like, come on, I used you like 2 seconds ago and you were able to kill a Lino. Why are you having trouble with a stupid frickin' slime? Okay, now the story. What I'll say they did well is the beginning. It was fun seeing Zelda recruit the champions for the Divine Beasts. I liked seeing how Urobosa was like, bro, I got you, when Zelda asked her, and then Mipha was just kinda sad. Baby Sidon was cute though. Sometimes, non-canon stories are able to do cool stuff and not be restricted by being narratively accurate, but it also made it so that the things I wanted to see never really happened, which was kind of disappointing. And the story got pretty confusing at times. Things just kept getting crazier and crazier, which was awesome, but also did hurt the story because they wouldn't take a lot of time to just chill out and explain what just happened. They just went to the next big thing. So after the midpoint, the story fell off for me. They added more villains and characters for the story, but they were pretty lame and stupid. They weren't interesting, and they were just there to be evil. No backstory, basically, they were just there to be a bitch. So experiencing the story was like watching a good filler episode. It's good and interesting, but at the end of the day, I didn't really care about it. And the ending was meh. It was just like, well, it's done. Time to 100% the rest of the game now. I know I just bashed the story quite a bit, but I still think that it was pretty good. I also think the cutscenes really helped out because they looked just as nice as they did in Breath of the Wild. But when it came to the moment-to-moment gameplay, the graphics were oof. The highest FPS this game can pull off is 30 FPS, and frame rate drops are super common. Especially when you do something like a special attack, the graphics plummet even more. Even when not in battle, the graphics are just bad. When you open the game, you get invited by PS2 graphics. But in my opinion, I don't think the bad graphics really matter, because your screen is going to look like this most of the time. And I know this footage doesn't look great, but trust me, when you're actually playing the game, it's like your brain shuts off the bad graphics. And when I played the game, the graphics didn't bother me at all. Like, the frame rate drops did get annoying sometimes, but it wasn't like a game changer for me. So if you don't mind occasional frame rate drops, I don't think this will be a problem for you. Even when the graphics sucked, the sound design always slapped. I don't ever remember the sound crapping itself even when the frames were dropping. The music track for this game was pretty alright. It's just, most of the time, you don't hear it because, you know. I thought that it was cool when they took calm OSTs from Breath of the Wild and made them more upbeat for action, and some of them were absolute bangers, like Kakariko Village or Gerudo theme. But there is one OST though that might be bothersome, the menu theme. It's very repetitive, very loud, and is easily annoying. I did find it a bit too much sometimes, but it did not hurt my overall enjoyment of the game, and I used it to annoy my friends, so it's not all bad. The DLC for the game gets you a good amount of stuff. You get some more levels, missions, and a rewards tree type thing that can give you some cool stuff, like 2 new weapon types and a new character. The weapons being the flail for Link and the Master Cycle for Zelda. Link's flail is pretty cool because it's like nunchucks and you get the ability to copy weapons and use them. But the Master Cycle for Zelda was way cooler. She's probably the fastest character in the game and you feel like a badass. And I mean, yeah, you can get stuck in walls because she can be too fast and the camera can sometimes go all over the place. But I feel that it kinda adds to the experience of a motorcycle. I know it's copium, but that's how I look at it. If you don't like either of those options, you still get to play as a Guardian, which I think is like the coolest thing that they added into the game. It has combos, but most of the time, you just spam the laser until everything dies. 10 out of 10 character. I mean, I don't really know why you would not like playing with it, but even if you somehow did, I think we can all agree that this is still really cool. I mean, I do have one complaint about the character, because it takes forever to unlock him. First, you gotta complete the game's full story, then you have to fight 4 boss levels, and then one final boss that takes like 8 minutes to complete. Usually, this is fine. You do lots of cool stuff to get cool reward, but the problem is, I don't really have that much stuff to do with cool reward. The only replayable part of the game is collecting korok seeds and chests. Like, it would have been much better if I just got the character at the start where I had a bunch of stuff to do. It just kinda sucked getting a cool character and not being able to use it for the majority of the game. That's what I'm saying. I might be the only one complaining about this, but whatever. Also, the majority of the rewards need to be unlocked by completing these boss levels, which are called EX alert missions. These missions are pretty much fighting levels where you either fight a bunch of stuff until you get to the big boss, or you run around until you find it. I'm really not a fan of these missions because I don't like fighting a boss with 1,000,000 HP, accompanied by another 3 mini bosses at the same time. Also, it doesn't help that the targeting system for the game is annoying and sucks. I'll be trying to focus my attention on the main boss, but then it just switches to a random moblin because I accidentally flicked the stick. It's not as annoying when you get higher level because you're able to pretty easily beat everything to a pulp, but when you're still low level, it's pretty annoying. But hey, if fighting a bunch of bosses sounds fun, then there you go. Spoiler alert, if you didn't get to the halfway point in the game, then you will be spoiled. So skip to here. Anyway, when I got the DLC, I was most excited to play these story missions, because not only were you able to see more character stories, you get to see more parts of Hyrule before the Calamity, but what you actually get is a generic story and the exact same Hyrule from Breath of the Wild. Yeah, I know, some people liked it, but it feels so lazy. One of the levels is set in Kakariko Village, and there was like no change. You would think in 100 years, some buildings would have changed, but nothing did. And the story wasn't even about Impa, it was about Daruk and Yunbo. It also doesn't help how all the stories feel the exact same. It's we need to protect the village or person, and then at the end they have a wholesome laugh together. Like, I see through the lies. I'm mainly disappointed because I feel they could have done so much better. They could have had a storyline where the champions teach the new generation how to get stronger, or them talking about how bad the Calamity affected Hyrule. But nope, it just felt so rushed and bad. And I know there's going to be some people that liked the story and tell me I'm wrong, but you gotta admit that they could have shown more parts of Hyrule that actually looked different 100 years ago. I didn't like the story, but I did like the gameplay element of memory missions. They're just random challenges, and if you do one of them, you get a secret character, which I won't talk about, because secret. And if you do them all, you get a secret cutscene, so pretty cool. I was just disappointed in the story aspect, but gameplay-wise, they're not bad. Before I mention the new character, I just want to talk about the smaller stuff in the DLC. There's side levels that are recommended for level 80, you can unlock modded champion weapons which look awesome, and some characters get extra combos. Most of them are not really important, but some of them were cool, like Impa's, where she can rain down a bunch of her clones. I didn't care about the majority of them, but I liked that they were there. And finally, for the last piece of DLC content, Purah and Robbie. If you finish all of the story missions, you get to unlock them, and they're weird for a number of reasons. 1, they're the only character that plays as 2 characters. 2, their own attacks can stun themselves or knock them around. And 3, they're supposed to feel clunky. Basically, the game wanted them to feel a little weird because in the story they're like best buds who mess around with each other, but it just feels too weird. Because most of the time it feels like you're playing as Robbie and you have Purah as your sidekick. Again, I know that's the point, but it just feels like they should have been separate. But they use cool gadgets in their fights and are able to use some of the Divine Beast's powers in their attacks. And even if their attacks feel clunky, they still look cool. And I like hearing the Purah thing. Overall though, I feel like they're pretty fun to play as, it just takes a bit of time to get used to them. I know I dissed the game a lot during this video, but I wanted to say on record that it's still a really good game. Like if I was gonna put it in a tier list, it'll probably be in B. Because the Hyrule style gameplay is not for everybody, but I personally loved it. There are so many unique characters which you can use to thrash everything, and I was honestly surprised by just how many characters they were able to make with just the Breath of the Wild roster. This game has an abundance of stuff to do, which kept me playing for hours when I first got it. You can't help the urge to make all the orange stuff disappear. But the problem is that you can't do something 100 times in a row and expect it to still be the same amount of fun. I also found that the story did get a bit wacky near the end, and I personally wasn't really a big fan of how things played out. And my opinion remained the same with the DLC story as well. However, in my opinion, I think that Age of Calamity and the DLC is still worth your time. And I think you should at least try the free demo if you're interested in this type of gameplay. The game did get a little repetitive, and I was slightly disappointed in the story, but the Hyrule gameplay combined with Zelda was one of the funnest things I've played. I don't think this game will appeal to everybody, but if you like the combat, then I think it'll be worth your time. So thank you so much for watching, and have a good day.